This episode is brought to you by adamandeve.com. For 50% off almost any item, a free gift, and free shipping, use promo code MULTI at checkout. Oh, okay. From your point of view, I can see how, when you're sitting in traffic all stressed out and then you come home stressed out and then I'm there immediately upset with you. I can see how that would be really upsetting or really off-putting when you were expecting to come home and things are fine. Or, okay, well, I can see from your point of view that you didn't get a message from me and I came home late, and so I can totally understand how that would feel really lonely or concerning or upsetting. And again, that's not necessarily saying like, okay, you're right or you're wrong or whatever. It's just validating like, okay, if this is what your reality was, I can totally understand why you would feel X, Y, Z.
If you're happy with the same old ways of dating,
if you enjoy sucking at communication,
and you have no desire to improve your romantic life, then our podcast might not be for you.
But if you want some out-of-the-box ideas to deepen your current relationships,
broaden your sexual horizons,
develop a better understanding of yourself,
or learn more about non-monogamy,
then you've come to the right place. I'm Jace.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Dedeker.
And this is the Multiamory podcast.
Songs I know I did, forcing me to form myself to fit.
On this episode of the Multiamory podcast, we're talking about how to repair after a fight with a partner or even maybe a close friend. We did an episode not too long ago about having healthy arguments, which is episode 210 if you want to check that out. But today, we're focusing on what you can do after a fight has already happened, how to use it to actually deepen your connection and avoid future arguments. So we're going to be talking about, after a little fender bender, how to take your relationship to the repair shop.
Yeah, I like that.
Make it better than new. So it's a little different than a car, though, because it's like better than it was before the accident.
I see. So it's not just they put on like the cheap replacement
right.
bumper.
Yeah, or like the little suction cup thing to pull out the dents, but it still looks bad. It's like, no.
It's it's like an upgrade also. It was a really good repair shop.
They replace the entire exterior and then go from there.
Ooh,
maybe it's
like
sort
that.
of like in Altered Carbon.
Oh, yeah.
When she loses her arm, but then gets the super awesome cybernetic arm.
Yeah, what are they called? Not the skins, it's a sleeve. Ooh.
Yeah, well, she still had the same sleeve, but she got the new arm, the like cybernetic arm.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, so I'm going to keep on
good,
rolling along.
Good show.
Cool.
Yeah.
The listeners who are into that show were like, yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the problem.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Tell me about the
We
problem.
love problems.
Fights are the problem.
That's why we're here,
Fights.
for problems.
They happen. Fights and arguments happen. There's research out there that states that couples who do fight actually have better relationships. At the same time, I've also seen people use that as a justification for staying in a shitty relationship or in a relationship that's fundamentally incompatible. Honestly, it reminds me of what really bothers me about The Notebook. Sorry.
Okay.
I've still never seen that film.
That's fine.
You're like,
That's
don't see
fine.
it.
It's not a bad film. It's pretty iconic, I suppose. But what bothered me about The Notebook is they very much got wrapped up in this idea. I just remember part of their relationship that their early relationship when they were young is they're talking about like they fought all the time, but they loved each other so much. Yes, they're very much like, we're so passionate, so that means we get into really passionate fights, and that's just a clue that we're just so dang passionate for each other.
Right.
And we're being like, no, that sounds like a fundamental incompatibility if you're fighting all the time.
Right.
Anyway.
But some people do like kind of bite and not literally bite, but sort of prod and
each
poke each other, verbally.
Yeah,
and that's just kind of how their relationships
once you know someone well enough, you know how to poke their buttons.
That's true.
You also know how to not poke their
Gently,
buttons.
yes.
But I think that's the thing, though, is I think that like the research out there that talks about people who fight in their relationships actually have better relationships and are more like a deeper connection and whatever. It's like in comparison to people who just keep it all inside and seethe and just like are so annoyed with their partner rather than just being like, hey, this sucks that you did this thing.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what it's talking about. But then people hear it and they think that kind of just like needling each other or just kind of being jerks to each other or like doing things that are like some of the four horsemen of the relationship apocalypse, right? Like just contempt for each other, that they think like, oh yeah, that's what they mean. This is fine.
Well,
what I'm doing is fine.
Yeah,
you know?
there is, I think, mean poking and prodding, and there's poking and prodding that's like out of fun and just knowing like what you two do. What you two do. Let's be honest.
We all do it.
We all josh each
the
other.
three of each other do it to each other,
Yeah.
but when I observe your relationship, it happens at times.
Well, for some more specifics about that, people can check out episode 210. Now that was our Fighting Fair, Fighting Dirty episode, correct?
Yeah.
So that's the one where we get more into the breakdown of what are some fair and like best practices for having an argument with a loved one versus what are some destructive practices.
Yeah.
You know, what's the destructive needling versus the playful joshing. So again, that's episode 210. However, the point is that fights just happen sometimes. And especially as the relationship goes on for more time, we can find ourselves having essentially variations on the same fights over and over, or the same topics can come up, or the same triggers can present themselves.
Yeah, there are fights out there that will just happen over and over again. And the Gottmans researched this, and their research has shown that 69% of the time, when couples talk about the one thing that they always argue about, it's just a perpetual problem, and it's not going to be resolved, and it actually shouldn't be resolved, which is really interesting to me. In these recurring fights can really just actually be an opportunity to deepen our connections with our partners, even though they may keep coming up time and time again.
Yeah, it's a very provocative statement
It is.
for the Gottmans to make of like...
It
this
shouldn't
thing-
be resolved.
Yes, this thing that you keep fighting about, it's going to keep being a problem and it's not going to be resolved. And maybe it even shouldn't. And you're like, what?
Yeah, I know. I guess I struggle with that a little bit too, because if it is a continual problem, it's like, why can't we like move forward with it in some way? But I guess
Yeah, well and that's kind
it's
of
deeper than that. Yeah.
So I think it's important here to kind of take a little pause to make this distinction between a perpetual problem that's not going to get resolved and doesn't need to, and that's okay. Like that's an opportunity to learn about each other, versus something that's never going to be resolved that is a deal breaker. And the Gottmans also, you know, I was reading about this, they also acknowledge that there are certain incompatibilities that just, not that like either one of you is a bad person, it's just like this is a deal breaker. Like you are not going to be happy long term in this relationship because of this. And just real quick, like basically in both cases, the thing that these have in common is that the reason why this will never get resolved is because you're not fighting about just a thing of like who takes care of this task, or where do we put this thing, or which house do we buy, or something. But this argument actually stems from a like fundamental personality trait of each of the two of you, or a fundamental belief of each of the two of you. And that is something that's most likely never going to change. And it's definitely not going to change by fighting about it. It's something that's not going to change. And so the question is this something that once I understand better why you make the decisions you make and like what the beliefs are behind it, that helps me understand you better, and we can stop fighting about it, even though the difference will never get fixed.
Sure.
So they're not saying like you're going to fight forever. They're saying that
There's an acceptance.
that difference isn't going to change.
Yeah.
You're not going to convince each other.
So it's like on the deal breaker side is there's something we disagree about and we're not going to be able to find a tolerable way to deal with it. And so the
Right.
relationship probably needs to end, versus the other side being like, there's something we disagree about, but we can actually agree to disagree
yeah.
in a healthy way and learn to live with each other and understand each other and work around it. Is that?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's actually go through some
Yeah.
examples of this.
Yeah, please,
And-
because I want to learn more about this too.
Yeah. Okay. So this example also comes from the Gottmans, and I liked this one. So this is about punctuality,
Ooh.
and this is
Yeah,
right, we all
I
kind
know.
of
Well, I mean, that is a question. Like, I do know some people who are just perpetually always not punctual,
Right.
or always like completely on time, and I don't know if that can be changed or not. I think there are steps to take to become more punctual, but yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a deal breaker.
Exactly. And this was one that they used as an example of something that's not a deal breaker.
Yeah.
But like you just said,
I bet you it
will
could
probably
be a
never
deal breaker
change.
for someone.
Maybe for some
Maybe.
people.
Yes.
Maybe. Yeah. I would.
It depends on the person.
Maybe,
I'd like to
yeah.
think that it's not a deal breaker, but maybe it is.
But yeah, it's this thing that like that's like a personality trait. Like you were saying, Emily, like some people just kind of are that. And maybe it came from the way that they were raised. Maybe there's some other aspect of their personality that just thinks differently about like what they value, whether they value taking their time more than being punctual, whereas for the other person, that might be the opposite, whatever it is. But the point here is that if you can understand that this isn't just like a thing that needs to be figured out or decided, but this is actually a fundamental trait of your partner, it changes the way you address it to be like, okay, rather than try to tell you why this is important or for me to tell you why I think my side's important and it's better, it's okay, let's find a way to live together with this.
Yeah.
Is it maybe a certain element of both sides, like one kind of accepting the other will be late and the other realizing, okay, I should kind of plan ahead, like plan everything a half hour earlier so that I'm, helping out my partner. Like, it's something for me with my stepdad, actually.
Is he not punctual?
No, he shows up like 15 to 30 minutes early for
Whoa.
everything.
I love your stepdad.
And
That sounds about right.
And if
he
you
was a
show
military
up-
guy.
Yeah, and if you just show up on time,
You're late.
he can
sorry.
be annoyed about it. Oh,
I'm a fan of myself. Okay, because this was my family of origin, all the Germans, where
I see.
it's very much that. It's like if you're on time, you are late.
Right.
We're going
Yeah,
to show up an
yeah.
hour ahead of time and sit
Yeah.
in the car and wait,
Right,
because that's how
totally.
we'd rather spend our
Totally.
time.
That's 100% my stepdad.
Yes.
But you're like wasting time just sitting in your car then.
But you're early.
You know
and
what?
so
I
you
was
can
on
relax.
time today. I was on time today.
You were.
I'm not always, but I am a lot of the time. I'm
Right.
like, I toe that line.
We can't get derailed by
Yeah.
punctuality.
But so
Okay.
anyway, the example is that this was something that, growing up was an issue between me and my stepdad, but that now it's something like my brother and I were meeting up with him for something, and Josh and I together with each other were like,
We got to tell him that it's
he's-
like 30 minutes after when it is.
no, just we were like, okay, we should actually leave now because we know he's already probably sitting in the car waiting, right? So we should go and make sure that we're early. And then we did. And it's like just understanding that about a person rather than kind of fighting against it
Yeah.
Right.
makes a big difference.
Okay, I appreciate you giving the counterexample because I can already see listeners or me pretending to be a listener being mad at us about being like, what, you think we should just cater to all the late people all the time? So thank you for providing the counterexample.
No, it was catering to the not late people.
Exactly.
Right. But hopefully, some understanding can go both ways
Yes.
in a relationship, right? So let's look at some other ones.
All right, tidiness of the home. Now, I also don't think this is a deal breaker because I do think, and Dedeker is
And I think
grimacing over there.
Well, with all of these, it could be for someone and not for another. But
I
I
suppose
agree with
you're
Emily
right.
It's
here,
on a
though.
spectrum. I think it's on a spectrum because
Well,
it's
sure.
not a deal breaker for me if someone's like a little bit more messy than me or a little bit more clean than me. I can definitely learn to live with that and learn to find a compromise and a middle ground. If it's an extreme, usually in the extremely much more messy than me, then I'm just like, we could probably still be in a relationship, but probably couldn't live with that person.
Yeah, I get that. And I think probably Jace has become like super minimal from living with you.
It's been part of it. I mean, I
Yeah.
did that before I lived with her.
That's true.
I mean, we only lived together part of the year anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
But I
And
started
you
my
all are
minimalism
super
thing
minimal.
when we were not living together.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I need to get on that train a little more.
Oh, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
It's great, but you also don't if you don't want to, right? Like
I
that's
know.
what we're talking about here.
I'm a little bit of a hoarder because I'm pretty sure of my mother, and it's not
I was
that
raised that way too.
Yes,
yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
not that I like hoard to an extreme by any means, but it's just that like I am the same size as I was in high school, so I have clothes from high school still.
Well,
which is
bully for you.
No,
Let's
no.
talk about more of these examples.
Oh gosh. How to celebrate holidays, Christmas or other holidays. See, again, I don't feel that this is a deal breaker,
Yeah.
but
you can see how that would be a point of contention.
Maybe,
for
yeah.
couples, where
But
to one person it's like
do Thanksgiving
Christmas is
this
so-
way and do Christmas this way, or do Hanukkah this way and do, whatever this way.
Definitely something I run into with my partner Alex is, and I think I'm the weird one. I don't think he's the weird one. Is he, like very much holidays are a very important thing, Christmas and birthdays and things. And it's very important to celebrate them like on the day and do all the things. And for me, like I was definitely raised where it was like, whatever, practicality always trumps sentimentality. So if it's not convenient to celebrate the holiday on this day,
like you.
we're going to reschedule it to another day, And so I'm like, what? I can fly on Christmas. It's so much cheaper, And he's like, what? You would fly on Christmas?
And you're like, I love flying on Christmas. It's great because nobody is on the plane.
Right. So it's the kind of thing where I think that comes up for me, where it's definitely not a deal breaker, but I think because it can be so emotional, I can definitely see how it can generate fights, or fights that happen every year, potentially.
Exactly. Because that, for people who do care about, like even if it's not just about the day it happens on, but it's like the way we do Christmas is super important, and I want to see all my family, and the other person's like, for me, Christmas is like, I want to get away, I want to take a trip, I just want it to be the two of us, like whatever it is. You can see how that would be a very emotionally charged.
Well, you got to compromise. You got to do one thing one year and one thing another year.
I was just talking to a friend of mine, and one of her partners was raised Jehovah's Witnesses. And so he was raised not celebrating any holiday.
Oh.
Not even birthdays.
Really?
Yeah. That's how they do. Anyway, he's not anymore, but he's still like around Christmas, and he lives with her and with her other partner, and still around Christmas he's like, I just don't want anything to do with this, really.
Wow.
He kind of tries to play along a little bit, but for the most part he's just like, whatever,
Oh my
gosh. Which is also really fascinating.
That's fascinating.
But anyway, that's an example of something that hopefully you could work with and figure out a way to make that work.
Ooh, this one's getting into some crunchy territory. How to relate to in-laws. So, I think this becomes more challenging if somebody doesn't like their in-law, and like they have a really tough time with them, because I know that like historically in-laws have been deal breakers or just major points of contention for people. And so, I don't know. This could be a learn to live with it situation for sure. I just watched the show Years and Years. Highly recommend it. Everyone needs to watch it. But, like the wife of one of the main characters, like really didn't like his grandmother and had to learn to live with her. But then at the end of the show, they ended up being like very close. So I don't know. I think that yes, you can learn to deal with each other better.
Well, I don't think this doesn't even necessarily have to be when you don't get along with the in-laws. It could just be that for you're like, the in-law relationship isn't one that's super important to me to foster. Whereas your partner is like, why aren't you like texting with my mom or whatever? I think the same stuff could come up with how people view metamor relationships, because they are
that's
not
a
dissimilar
great point.
from in-laws.
That's a really good point.
For some people, it's like, whatever, like I'm fine to be hands off. And for other people, they kind of want something much more kitchen table-ish or much more,
we all have to be in on this.
I actually think that like the more I've thought about it, the analogy of in-laws, I think is the analogy for metamors. Like it's really the same type of thing. It's like it's someone who's connected to your partner. They're important to your partner. And that you didn't get to choose, right? Like they're just there. And I think it is very similar where it's like, I don't know what kind of relationship I want to have with them necessarily. I think this one also extends to like how close one person is with their family versus another, where one person might be like, I kind of prefer having my own space, and the other is like, oh, I want my siblings to come over every weekend and like bring their kids and hang out, and like, it's something that needs to get figured out and talked about rather than just arguing over who's correct.
I mean, I call my mom like almost every single day, and my partner
can't even imagine.
No, I know,
that.
and my partner like talks to his parents like once a month or once every 3 months or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. My mom and I just gab.
And that's great, right? And that's, if that caused an issue with a partner, though, it's not like they're going to convince you to not do that, right?
No, that would never happen.
Right.
That
so that's a good example of like one of these just kind of inherent, like, no, this is just a thing about me.
Yeah. Ooh, okay, this one's a deal breaker, I think.
I think it can be.
Yeah. Too monogamous or not too monogamous? That is the question.
Well, maybe more of like what level of monogamy and or non-monogamy,
right?
Or sometimes I think the Gottmans phrased this as like what level of fidelity you expect in the, or what fidelity looks like in the relationship.
And I think that too many people, and we'll get into this in a later episode, but I think too many people just expect that like if you are monogamous, that means this.
same
That
exact
means
thing. Yeah.
exactly what everyone on the planet thinks that it means.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's not the case. I mean, all of these things need to be spoken about and communicated about.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one, to even not put it in the context of non-monogamy, but just like...
Is hanging out with an ex a bad thing?
Exactly, yeah. Like
Yeah.
maybe your best friend is your ex, and to one person it's like, that's completely unacceptable for you to be friends with this person, and the other person's like, no, but this is my best friend.
Yeah.
You can see how that's not something that one's just going to like convince the other.
Totally.
And
I
it's
could
not that either one is wrong.
I know, exactly. I
It's
could see
just not
maybe
compatible.
in some situations, some people learning to live with that.
Yeah.
Maybe. If
Sure.
but I could also see in many situations that just being not a non-starter.
Yeah.
you
Or
know?
just, something that pisses someone off for
Right.
a long time.
I
What
think
about-
this one is a good example of one of those where it's like for some people this could be a deal breaker and for others it might not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just
Yeah.
really depends on how that shows up. But I think if they argue about it trying to convince the other person or trying to just figure out who's right,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get anywhere, and you're
Yeah.
going to fight about this forever.
Forever.
Yeah,
And you're going to
totally.
be miserable doing it. And it's not going to make you closer, right?
Yeah.
It's not a fight that's going to make you
Mm-hmm.
closer and more intimate with each other.
What about wanting kids or not?
Okay, that is a deal breaker in my
Yeah.
opinion.
For a lot of people, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it was a situation where I was dating someone who was okay having kids with someone else.
Well, okay, yes.
You know,
Yeah.
if they're into that,
But-
then I'm like, yeah, great. But if it's I want kids with
You.
you, then I'm like, sorry.
Nope.
That's
Yeah.
nippity nope.
I have kids with a bunch of other randos out there, but not with you, and I don't know them. Yeah.
Right, but it's that like that's
Yeah.
a good one where it's you could like, and I think this one sometimes people will compromise on
Mm.
and not really think that through, and not really think through like, I'm going to get to the end of my life then and always regret this and be sad about this.
Yeah, I've heard that from various people, like, you know,
On both sides.
My
Yeah.
my
Either
voice
having kids
teacher.
or not having kids.
Yeah, that's true. But my voice teacher's like, one of the greatest regrets in my life is that I've never had a kid, and I'm like, yeah, like you can. I'm an example that you can do it alone, but you know,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
But and on the other side too, it's like, well, my partner really wanted kids, so we had kids, and it's been really hard, and it's put a strain on our relationship, and I wasn't able to accomplish the things I wanted to do in life, and you know, it can be on either side. And I think so. This one, I would tend to think
Not to imply that those people don't love their kids. Like,
Yes,
before you
yes.
angry tweet at us, we know
I
that
hate them. No, I'm
generally when you
kidding.
have a kid, you love it, which is a good thing. So, but just,
Right.
yeah. Anyway.
But yeah, just that like this one maybe isn't something to compromise on.
No.
Just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah.
a thought.
Cohabitation in marriage, yeah, again, I think that you can compromise on that, but I think that if somebody fundamentally is like, I really want these things in my life and I want them with a partner, and then, you know, if another person doesn't, then that's not really compatible.
Yeah, I'll say that this is going to sound weird. One of the best breakups I ever had.
Oh, yes?
Yeah.
But probably, I mean, one of the most like healthy, respectful, where I was like hurt and disappointed, but not like harmed by the breakup was when someone who I was only dating for a few months was honest with me of like, you know what, I'm really clear that I want to get married and have kids.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I don't think that it's
I
clear
think
that
I know
you
who
don't.
this person
yeah.
is. Yeah.
And he was just really honest and upfront with me
Yeah.
about that.
And now he's married.
And now he's married and probably
Good-
gonna have
good
kids.
for
And good
him,
for
yeah.
him. You know, we're
Right.
still in touch and it's positive and it's fine.
That's
you know?
lovely.
But it's you know, that kind of thing where he was honest about what he wanted and didn't do the thing that I think a lot of people do, which I've done, you know, of like, I'm just gonna go along with this and maybe
I
this
guess
person
just
will
hope it'll
change their
change.
mind.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'll change my mind. I don't know.
They won't. You won't.
Yeah. It's unlikely.
Yeah.
Right.
But what I so appreciate about that was just that it's like he was honest and we could end
Yeah.
the relationship early
Yeah.
as opposed to it getting all kind of murky and in the weeds about this kind of stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Next one is about how we spend money. This one, right, has to do with right, like, what do we value, right? It's about our values and our beliefs of like, to me, you know,
I want to save a lot, or I want to go on extravagant trips
Yes.
like
Right.
once a year.
right. To
Yeah.
me, it's like, what's the point of money if I'm not using it to have experiences? And on
Totally.
the other side, it's like, no, the purpose of money is safety.
Yeah.
And so that means saving it, right?
Ooh, wow.
And this is,
Just said a couple things right there that I can relate to. Yeah.
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 We'll do the money episode, redo the money episode. So
Yeah.
we can
Yeah,
talk
that'd be
about all
great.
that
Need
stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that I don't know. I don't know if that's a deal breaker unless it's like we share all of our finances.
Yeah,
and
if you
you're
have your
like,
own monies.
you're like draining our bank account constantly on exorbitant expenses that I don't want to. Like that seems like that's a deal breaker.
Totally. Yeah.
And
And
maybe
people
that's
break
a way
up
to
over
work.
money all the time.
It's,
Yeah.
I've heard it's the number one cause of divorce,
Yeah,
or at
that
least
makes
one
sense.
of the top 3 causes. Yeah.
Totally.
Another one's how out we want to be. Now,
Regarding
this-
like non-monogamy or
non-monogamy or whatever,
Anything,
you
yeah.
know, something that you feel like one person wants to hide and the other wants to shout it from the rooftops. That could be a deal breaker, especially.
I think you should be, with the pace car there a little bit, but
well, sure, and it's
Kinda
it's an
depends
issue
on
of
your
respect,
overlap of-
but-
Social circles and professional
true.
circles, because depending on the context of your life, maybe it is something you can live with where it's like my partner being more out than I am doesn't affect my life or doesn't influence my life or doesn't compromise my safety. And so that's okay for us to be different levels of out versus you may be in a different situation where no, like
Yeah.
because there's some kind of professional overlap or social overlap, like if my partner's out, it doesn't necessarily make it safe for me or whatever.
totally.
Well, and I just want to say too that with this one, it's like this could be a deal breaker or it could be a compromise. It depends, because it also could, like Emily, you said, I would agree with you that out of respect for someone's boundaries, that I wouldn't be,
Gregarious
I
about
wouldn't
it,
be,
yeah.
I wouldn't be out and like posting on my social media about non-monogamy if I had a partner who
Who's
felt
like-
like they couldn't do that.
yeah.
But at the same time, for me, that is such an important part of my identity and my professional life to
Yeah.
be out.
Yeah.
That would be a deal breaker. Not
I
because I
agree.
think they're wrong or they think I'm wrong. It's just like, well, this is just fundamentally
Yeah.
incompatible.
Sorry, I do
unfortunately.
a podcast on non-monogamy.
Right.
Like,
Part of the cost
Right.
of admission. a
Yeah,
little bit.
exactly.
Yeah. And then the last one we have here is use of substances, or whether or not someone will admit to having an addiction. Now, this could be disagreeing about use of substances recreationally that isn't like an addiction problem, but just like one person's very not okay with that and the other does like to, whatever it is,
dabble.
Yeah.
Or it could be like one person not admitting to an addiction problem or alcoholism or something.
Yeah,
That's one of the ones the Gottmans point out as
Maybe more of a deal breaker.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus just that you like to use this substance, but I don't.
Right.
And that's okay. It's
Yeah.
just like we just don't do that together as long as like we're safe and it's not,
Right.
having some kind of destructive effect on our lives.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about what to do about these perpetual problems when they're not deal breakers. So yes, they can be destructive. They can cause a relationship to fall apart, but they can also cause a relationship to get stronger and for us to learn more about our partners and ourselves in these situations. Like, why is it that we're doing these things? Why is it that they're doing these things? So with all of this, definitely try to let go of like being right or winning. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit in episode 210. But it is kind of worth reiterating here that like winning and being right and like one-upping your partner is like not a good thing in these situations.
not helpful.
It's not even an effective thing.
Right.
I
Yeah,
think that's
that's
the more
true.
important part of this is that it's not going to be
Well, it's
effective in actually
yeah.
changing the perpetual problem.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, again, maybe not, the goal is not to change these perpetual problems, but if you want to talk about how to like be better in these situations and be a better communicator, then going that route is not going to be helpful at all. And yeah, the goal is really not to jump back into the fight or try to like fight your way to being right, but rather like trying to find a mutual understanding between the two of you and kind of delve into what your partner is going through, what their reality is during the fight. And I think that really is huge there, like to try to understand for each other their point of view, to walk a mile in their shoes or whatever.
Yeah, to like understand what the beliefs are behind that thing.
Exactly.
Like one of the ways that I've heard it put is that you're not arguing about a thing, but you're arguing about a meaning of a thing. And that's the stuff that's not going to get resolved, is like you might have a different meaning that you attach to this thing, and that's just the reality. And so learning the meaning that this has for each other is more important than the actual decision about the thing.
Yeah.
In terms of these like perpetual fights that come up over and over again.
Hey, y'all, I want to take a quick moment to talk about adamandeve.com. to be totally honest, there's a soft spot in my heart for adamandeve.com because, first of all, I don't know if you know this, but they've been around since before the internet. Like, the company's been around since before there was even a .com to attach to their name.
It was just Adam and Eve then.
Yeah,
How
I'm
far
pretty
it's
sure
come.
if I think back, they were probably the first website I ever ordered a sex toy from. Ever.
wow.
Like, they
Yeah.
were around before Amazon was around and before any other number of like competitors were around. So they go way back. So if you go to adamandeve.com, you can find all kinds of wonderful things, whether it's sex toys or lingerie or pornography or lube or condoms, pretty much anything you could possibly need for sexy times. And the best part is that if you go to adamandeve.com and if you use our special promo code, which is MULTI, M-U-L-T-I, then you can get 50% off pretty much any item in the store. They will send you a free gift along with your order, and they'll also give you free shipping. And my favorite part, this promo code can be used multiple times as well. So anytime you need to buy that sexy thing, the lingerie, the condoms, that sex toy that's really expensive but you've been wanting for a long time, if you want to knock 50% off of that price, plus get a free gift, plus free shipping, use promo code MULTI at checkout.
I want to take a moment to talk to all of you about Patreon. So a lot of you probably already know about Patreon, but I want to talk specifically about why it's so important to us as podcasters and why I think it's such an amazing thing in the way that it's changed the world of podcasting or other content creation. It's that, podcasts are free. That's kind of the whole deal. I mean, yeah, there's some companies now doing podcasts that you have to pay for, but we'll see if that takes off. But right, the whole point of podcasts is it's like individual people or groups of 3 people like us can make a podcast and can put it out there and are able to share things like this podcast that are not quite as mainstream. And the fact that there's a platform like Patreon where you listeners can support directly to the people making stuff you like.
We so
is
appreciate
cool.
it.
Yeah. So if you go to patreon.com/multiamory, you can contribute to this show. And so at the $5 a month level, we also give you a chance to join our private Facebook group and our Discord chat room where we talk about episodes. We share positive things. People can come with their troubles or their questions or requests for episodes, things like that. And at the $7 a month level, we have our ad-free episodes and bonus episodes, and the episodes come out a day early. But then at our $9 a month level and $15 a month level, we have an exclusive online video discussion group. It happens once a month where we kind of lead an actual, quote, in-person through video chat discussion group where we can come and actually talk about what's going on in our lives. What are your questions that you want more immediate, direct feedback and support from the group, or just cool things you want to share, especially if you don't have a space where you feel like you can do that at home. So we would love for you to be part of that. Again, that's at the $9 or the $15 level. And also, just recently, we started at the $15 level, sending out a cool little exclusive thing. Like it's maybe a pin or a sticker or a patch or something that we don't sell, actually. Something that maybe we have with us when we're on tour, but it's not something you can just buy. And so a way you can get that is by becoming a $15 patron, and then we'll send you some little gift as a thank you for that. So be our best friend. We would love to have you join us in that Patreon community. And again, it means so much to us to be able to allow us to keep doing this show.
And if we've been helpful for you, if you've appreciated the knowledge that you've gotten from the show, if you found out something interesting, or if you found something really interesting from one of our guests that we interviewed, we'd really appreciate if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review. And now it seems ridiculous. We do read every single review. We do pay attention to
Dedeker
that
enjoys reading them aloud to us and being like, look at this one. It was so great. And we love it.
Well, it's not just about making us feel good, but like we do pay attention to people's feedback. We do pay attention when people say, hey, I want to see more of this on the show, or hey, I really liked this part of the show. We love knowing what people's backgrounds are. It's really interesting to know where it's like, oh, I'm in a monogamous relationship, but I listened to this, or I'm in this kind of relationship, or I'm just starting this kind of relationship. We really love getting to know that. So again, it probably won't take up very much of your time, but it would really help us a lot. And that's to go to iTunes or go to Stitcher and just leave us a review.
So if you do find that you have one of these things where it's like we have a variation on the same fight over and over again, perhaps this is an opportunity to look at what might be this meaning behind it, what might be this fundamental personality trait or belief in us that is attached to this that we're maybe not even realizing is different. We just assume the other person believes the same thing, and so we don't understand why they make different decisions than us, and we have to have an argument about it. So what we've done here for this episode is we've taken advice and steps proposed by researchers like the Gottmans, as well as other articles by psychologists and our own personal experiences of working with couples and also in our own lives. And we have created SHOP.
Till you drop. No, I'm kidding.
Till you drop. Different, yes. So, it's like I said in the intro, you're driving along in your relationship car and you have an accident, and maybe you keep having this same accident.
Or maybe it's like the check engine light keeps coming on, or you keep that weird clangety noise keeps going off, and you're like, what is that noise? Or the air conditioning keeps cutting out, and you're like,
you need to put a patch on your tire. It keeps like getting,
or your tires are just like
filled.
whatever, some perpetual ongoing problem.
So you take it to the repair shop, and the beautiful thing about this repair shop is that it makes your car even better and stronger and faster than it was before.
Harder, better, stronger. What is it? Yeah.
Harder, better, faster, stronger.
There it is.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's faster, higher, stronger is the...
Oh my God, this
is
really
we're
embarrassing
talking about,
because I know
You're talking
Daft
about
Punk.
the Daft Punk song.
Correct.
I'm talking about the Olympics. The Vini, Vidi, Vici, Vidi,
Oh, I like
Vici,
that.
Vidi, Vini.
No,
you know what
that's
I'm
I
talking
came,
about?
I saw, I
Vici?
conquered.
No,
what are you
shit,
talking
that's the
about,
one.
Chase?
The Olympics one, the faster, higher, stronger, right?
I don't know.
What are you talking about with the Olympics?
I feel like I should know this. I love the Olympics.
Is it be the best you can be?
Nah.
That's the army. That's be all you can be.
Oh.
It's the Nike symbol. No.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's Citius Altius Fortius, which is the Olympic motto, and it means faster, higher, stronger.
Oh.
So
okay.
that Daft Punk song is kind of a play on this idea, I think. At least that's how I interpreted it.
I thought it was just about technology, but
It is.
let's talk about a repair shop.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. So the SHOP is an acronym, and it stands for Stories, History, Ownership, and Prevention. So this is not something to do during the fight. Go to 210 for that. This is after the fight, when you're like, hey, we're having the same fight. Let's go to the repair shop.
Or
Yeah.
like doing this in your radar.
Yeah, it's a great thing for a radar.
Yeah, totally. During
It's a-
that section on fights
Yeah,
and
it's
conflicts.
a great thing for any time where you're not in the emotional upheaval
Yeah.
of the fight.
Yeah.
You know, when things have calmed down a little bit, when you're feeling a little bit better, when you have a better perspective on it, and you can enter into this space of kind of taking a step back and analyzing what really happened here for me, what really happened here for you. Let's see if we can come to a place of mutual understanding on this.
Yeah. So let's go through the steps.
Yeah.
Woo.
Okay. So the first one is the S for stories. So what you're going to do is you're going to take turns sharing your experience of what happened during the fight, or sharing your story of the fight. Sharing, how did you feel? What was your experience of what happened? What was your reality? So it could be things like, so I'm going to create a little example for us just to use as we go through this. So let's take this first example of the perpetual problem. Let's do the punctuality one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
So maybe my story was like, well, I experienced that when you came home half an hour late and I hadn't gotten a message from you in like 2 hours. I felt lonely. I felt a little worried. I felt a little bit abandoned. You know, I had this story in my head that you totally forgot about me, or I had this story that maybe you were just having such a great time hanging out with someone else that you weren't going to come home, or things like that. And then my partner gets an opportunity to also share their story as well, of maybe it was I don't know, like I just lost track of the time, and then I got caught in traffic, and then I was, really worried because I knew that we had plans tonight, and I was really stressed about coming home, and so that's why I was all flustered when I came home. And so bear in mind that like when you and your partner share your stories or your realities of the fight, they're probably going to be two very different realities. And we've talked about this on the show before, this idea of multiple competing narratives, essentially, that neither of your narratives are wrong. They're both right. That's the weird paradoxical thing about
So
all
weird.
of this. And so avoid the temptation to get into arguing about which one is the right story, which one is more accurate, or trying to essentially discredit your partner's story by being like, well, I don't see how you would think that because yada, 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 yada. Or like, well, you shouldn't, well, you should have known that this was actually what the case was, yada, yada, yada. And
this sounds easy and it's actually very hard.
It is very hard.
Because,
to not get defensive in these moments.
Because in that example, like Dedeker was sharing, right, of like, to me, it meant that you didn't care about me and maybe you were never going to come home or you didn't value me.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I was stuck because of this thing or like whatever.
Or be like, why would you think that?
Right. It's like, why would I've always come home. Why would you think that?
Yeah.
Right. It's hard not to fall into that temptation instead of to step back and validate it.
Yes. So it's very important when you're exchanging your stories or your realities of the fight that it could be... you can validate what your partner's experience was. And remember that validating, it doesn't necessarily mean agreeing. It doesn't mean like, oh, okay, well, your experience was the right one. So, or, well, my experience was definitely the right one. But something more along the lines of like, oh, okay, from your point of view, I can see how, when you're sitting in traffic all stressed out and then you come home stressed out and then I'm there immediately upset with you, I can see how that would be really upsetting or really off-putting when you were expecting to come home and things were fine. Or, okay, well, I can see from your point of view that you didn't get a message from me and I came home late, and so I can totally understand how that would feel really lonely or concerning or upsetting. And again, that's not necessarily saying like, okay, you're right or you're wrong or whatever. It's just validating like, okay, if this is what your reality was, I can totally understand why you would feel X, Y, Z. And again, don't tell your partner what they did or what they didn't do. Just stay focused also on your own feelings when you're telling your story. Again, we'll reiterate that using I statements is generally better than using you statements.
So like with Dedeker's example there, it's like, I felt like, it meant you didn't care about me or you didn't value our plans or you were having more fun with someone else and forgot about me, whatever it is, rather than saying, well, I was upset because you forgot about me or because you didn't care about me.
Because you didn't give a shit about communicating to me. Or
Right. It's trying to keep it focused on how I felt and what it meant to me rather than what you thought, what you did, how you felt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is this
I just love this quote.
From the Gottmans?
It's from the Gottmans.
They say, there is no immaculate perception. And basically what that means is like there's no one who has a monopoly on the truth.
There's like immaculate conception.
I think that's what they're going for is a little riff. Yeah.
Cute.
But yeah, this idea that it's pretty much impossible for one of you to have been the one who has the whole story and the other person's totally wrong. Like we all bring our different filters and different pasts and different feelings and chemical makeups and all these things to a situation. And so that's always going to influence your perception of an event or of a fight.
Yeah.
Should we go on to the next step? I feel like that makes sense. So it's stories. It's like, what was the story of what happened for me, and acknowledging that they're both true.
Yes.
Like they're both real for each of you. Right?
Yeah.
That's the first step.
So the next one is H in shop, which is stands for history. So history kind of goes along with things like triggers or just old things that happen in your life that can cause you to feel a certain way about a certain situation, or just can be like, a button that is pushed in that particular moment. So this, I guess, is another Gottman quote. Sometimes escalation can come from a trigger or old, enduring vulnerabilities that occurred before this relationship began.
That was kind of their definition of trigger. I think it's it works for what they're talking about. I think it's good to clarify.
Yeah, and we have
trigger has other meanings.
Yeah, we have to give the disclaimer that in this context, talking about a trigger from your past could very literally mean like a PTSD trigger that causes a full-on PTSD response. Could mean an anxiety trigger. It could just mean some kind of sticky, uncomfortable thing from your past that this situation reminded you of.
Yeah. That pushes a button on you and that you have an emotional response to afterwards. Yeah. So in this case, when this happens, try to think about the time in which this maybe occurred in the past and where like you kind of had a similar set of feelings, and then try to tell your partner of the story of what happened so that they can understand your sensitivities and why this might trigger you. I think that's a really good thing to be even aware of for yourself And it maybe might cause you to go back into some uncomfortable situations in your past. And that's challenging, but again, being forthcoming with your partner, I think, is really important in these moments.
Yeah, something my therapist asks me all the time, and which I've now adopted and also asks my clients all the time, is like, if I'm describing a situation where I'm like, yeah, and then this person said this, and I just feel really upset about it, and I feel upset about it now, that he'll ask me, okay, that thing that you're feeling right now, is there anything old and familiar about that feeling?
I like
That's
that.
a good way to put that.
And pretty much 99% of the time, I'm like, yes,
Yes.
it 100%, like, this is how my body felt the night that this thing happened 10 years ago, or in this relationship or whatever. Or like, maybe to bring it back to the punctuality example, I can be like, this brings me back to this past relationship where someone ignored me for like a full 2 days because they were with someone, and they dropped off the face of the planet, and I felt really abandoned, and it brings up all those same feelings.
Interesting. Yeah. And with this, it might not necessarily be related to trauma or a painful memory, but it can be related to maybe like a belief, just a fundamental belief that you have about something. So like, for example, like if you show up on time for this punctuality thing, that means that you care about me. So if you don't show up on time, then you don't care about me.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So, okay, on the other side of this, expressing understanding and empathy when your partner describes this incident is incredibly important. And like, again, as we said in the last one, don't try to tell them that their belief is wrong or try to convince them or get defensive in these moments. And again, that's easier said than done at times, but it's something to really think about in these moments. Don't try to like change their mind about it, because that might be something that comes in time on their own if you need to.
Or it might not, right?
Exactly. Or it might not, and that's also okay. Just really try to understand and empathize. And if you can't believe that thing is also true, then just be there for that person, express sympathy or understanding for them.
Yeah, I would even say, like, if you can't understand it, like, I just can't even get my head there to how you could possibly believe
That's
that thing.
definitely a thing that I've felt in my relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like, if you can't do that, then you just have to take their word for it.
Totally, yeah.
And just be like, I don't have to understand it necessarily to know that that's true for you.
I think that, yeah, I've had these moments where I'm like, my partner is like being really stubborn right now about this thing. And it's just, in reality, it's just kind of like a fundamental difference in our experience. And I might be like, I don't understand why you're being so rigid about this particular thing. Where to them, it's like, well, that's my reality of the situation, and I really can't change how I feel about it.
Well, at the same time, though, I think it's also important for your partner to acknowledge that it's like you have a different reality as
Totally.
well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
That's part of this whole repair shop process. Is,
Yeah.
again, not one person being like, well, I have this belief and it's the right belief and it's never
that's
going to
it.
change. It's like,
Right.
I have this belief.
That's my excuse to be an asshole.
I have
Yeah.
this belief and that's why it brought up these feelings for me. I recognize that you have a different belief and that's why you feel differently about this.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like these two things both exist in the same space-time.
Totally.
Yeah. So like another example of kind of this thing about beliefs, like we're talking about the messiness thing. And that's actually, so this example I wrote down here was like that for one person, it's like being able to keep my space messy and have my stuff out is how I feel independent, because maybe I grew up in a family
Really
that was
rigid
super
household.
military,
Yeah.
overbearing about how I did things. And so to me, this is how I feel free and independent.
So I could really, okay, so let's say just
Okay, sure.
you and I, Jace, were having this argument. I could definitely fuck this up right now. You know, it's like you share like your history of like, I grew up in this really rigid military family, was, you know, punished for things not being put away. And so now that I have my own space, like, you know, me being able to kind of put my stuff wherever is how I feel free. And I could really fuck it up by being like, well, I don't care. You're an adult. Get it together. You know, I can't
Right.
live like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Where I've completely, like, you've been vulnerable and opened up to me, and I've completely blasted over it.
Right.
And again, even when sharing your history, I don't have to be like, okay, well then everything's forgiven and that's your excuse. But I can be
Right.
like, okay, I can understand. Like, I can
Let's find a way
understand.
to...
yes,
Where
understand.
you're
And then
coming
I can
from
also
then.
share my trigger of like, I grew up in a house that was like all chaos all the time. And we were constantly having to move around and there was no stability. And so for me, coming home when things are nice and clean and organized, then that's my stability, you know, like, and again, those two things exist in the same space time and are both true and valid.
To even make this one a little bit more real life. So this was not a real conversation that Dedeker and I have had, but we have had a variation on this where we both like to have a pretty clean place.
Yeah.
However, there's like specific little things.
Like where to put like a certain thing, or Dedeker doesn't want like clutter in her line of sight or whatever.
So we had this issue specifically.
I just don't want clutter on flat surfaces.
So we had this issue that came up.
No, sorry.
We had this issue that came up a lot about where my like computer stuff would be
where
kept,
electronics go.
where electronics would go. And we kept having this kind of
you
argument
want like
again
a
and again.
station of like your electronics where everything is.
Well, that's kind of what we got to, is that the meaning was different for us. For her, the thing that was the most important was all surfaces being clear. And
all
then
surfaces.
right? And for me, the thing that was the most important was, for me, like, this is something that my computer station is something I come back to constantly throughout the day. And so for me, having it always available and set up is the more important thing. And so once we realized that, then it was like, okay, now we can work with this. Now we can figure out like, okay, well, let's make a spot for it that it can be put away, but is also convenient. Or this area is just going to be my stuff set up, but everywhere else is going to be this, so I won't set something over there. Or if I do, I'll put it away after I'm done. Right? Like, you can kind of work with it once you understand what the underlying like belief or thing is about it.
Yeah, definitely. What's next?
All right. The next is the O of shop, for ownership. Ownership. So in this one so you've talked about your stories. You've talked about your histories, if this is tied to anything, what your beliefs are about it. And then this is your chance to take ownership and accept responsibility for your own part in the fight. So not just ownership of like my beliefs, but like, okay, you know, what can I own up to in the way I handled this that actually led to us having a fight, right? Maybe you've been stressed, or you weren't a good listener, or you immediately made it about yourself rather than listening to what they talked about, right? Like, what can you own up to that contributed to the argument? So again, using Gottman research here, they have shown in their research that taking responsibility, even if it's just for a tiny part of the problem in communication, will sort of, it generates like a trust. It generates a way to step forward. It allows the other person to admit things as well.
Totally. Without
feeling like, well, if I admit that, then I lose and you win. And like, this is also something that if you were brought up in a situation where you never back down, that can be a hard thing to shift to.
So maybe in our hypothetical example with the punctuality thing, you know, on my side, I could be like, okay, well, I can take ownership for, you know, jumping down your throat as soon as you walked in the door. You know I shouldn't have done that, and I should have approached you maybe in a more calm way. And so I'm sorry about that. And then maybe my partner can take ownership for, well, I'm sorry that I didn't message you. I realized I should have at least communicated that I was running late. And so I'm sorry for not doing that. And notice that like no one person has taken responsibility for the entire situation, and it hasn't turned into a blame game, but it's like we've both been able to even pick out small parts to take responsibility for and take ownership for.
Yeah. That's great.
And yeah, I mean, for me, like, I don't know, I think that in both my family of origin and in a lot of formative relationships that I've been in, there has been this assumption that like taking ownership or apologizing means
you've lost.
Well, it's not even just that you've lost, but it means that you're admitting to like the whole, like you're taking responsibility for the whole thing. You know, that you're saying, okay, I was the wrong one, you were the right one, and so you can't apologize. You know, like you have to make it so that the other person apologizes or the other person admits wrongdoing, because if you do, and even in a small part, that means that you've lost. And so that's something that I've really had to pursue in my own personal growth, as it were. But I think, you know, if even just finding what's the small part is a really good place to start from, you know, to kind of help get that, what do I want to say? Kind of that whole ownership train a-going, you know, so that both of you feel comfortable to start taking ownership of all the multiple moving parts of this particular fight.
Yeah. I love that. All right. Prevention is the final one.
Final P.
The final P.
You know what they say?
Also the only P.
About ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Oh.
Really?
Have you never
I like
heard that?
No,
I've
but
heard
that's
that one
good.
before. Yeah, it's
That's
been a while
good.
though.
I like that.
Yeah.
So with prevention, discuss how you can do things differently next time. I like to do this a lot. Like, hey, like what are some actionable things
Right.
that we can, an action that we can take in order to prevent this? Like, can I, maybe take a breath for myself before when my partner walks in the door and, it's been really late or something. Can I just take a breath and like be kinder to them about it, or ask like, hey, I thought that we said you were going to come home 30 minutes ago. Like, did something happen there or whatever? Not so that it's like, how dare you, you dick, or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So try to think about like one way that each of you can make it better if this type of incident happens again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I was kind of just saying, like try to make a plan to minimize hurt feelings and avoid a future incident. And then again, just like sometimes understanding underlying beliefs, the things that we talked about before, the history of it all can really help. And can, again, infuse more empathy into the situation.
Yeah. This is something we talked about on the show a while back. I forget when it was, but something that, I mean, maybe Dedeker, you want to share, but just about someone saying they'll do something and not doing it to you has a lot more meaning than just them forgetting that thing.
Yeah, definitely. You hit the nail on
Did
the
I
head.
sum it up?
You summed it
Okay.
up pretty good.
Well, so for me, that was something that, like Emily was just saying, that just understanding that underlying belief can make a difference. So for me, it was like once we had that conversation and you kind of told me that the story of like that being a frustration for you growing up, of your
Just people
parents
forgetting.
or whoever like not following through on things that they promised you, that to you that has a lot more meaning than I realized. Because for me, it was just sort of like, oh yeah, I forget stuff sometimes. Like that's not, it sucks, but it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And realizing that like, okay, based on your story, that is a big deal. And so that's changed the way that I will react to those things, either through prevention of like, okay, if I've said I'm going to do something for Dedeker, like I'll make extra effort to put a
Make sure that I
reminder
do it,
or something like that. Like take actual steps, not just be like, I'll be better about that, but actually like make a reminder, write it down, do something like that. Or if I do forget, because it happens sometimes, to take it seriously, to not be like, oh yeah, whatever, because I know that actually makes it worse, rather than to me it's like that's like, okay, that makes it better by sort of downplaying it. But instead realizing doing that makes it worse, and so it's like I'll be extra apologetic about it and immediately propose how I'll remedy it.
I like that.
Right?
That's great.
Of like, okay, you're right, I forgot about that, but I'm going to move this thing around so I can go do that right now, or like I'll set a reminder right now and I'll do that in 2 hours after I have this meeting or whatever it is, so that right away she knows, no, this is important and I've made a plan to address it.
Yeah.
You make me cry. You're
Aw.
so sweet. Well, I think on my side, it's also been kind of internalizing and realizing that you're not a terrible person for forgetting things.
Whoa.
And just,
How dare you?
we've had a lot of conversations about the different ways that our respective memories work,
yes.
and it's another one of those where like that's probably going to be an unsolvable problem, quote unquote unsolvable perpetual problem in our relationship, just because of fundamentally the different ways that we process information.
Yeah.
But it's not something where one of us has to make this extreme effort of changing the other person.
Sure.
Jace is not like making this extreme effort to try to change me to chill the fuck out about remembering things, and I'm not trying to, harangue Jace into remembering things all the time perfectly. That it's kind of like in understanding the background, we're able to do that kind of like agree to disagree and like live with these differences.
Yeah.
And it being okay and being able to have ways to repair it each time that something
great.
happens.
Yeah.
It is pretty great.
It is great. You're right.
Right. That's fantastic. Well done, you two.
Shall we recap?
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's recap. So taking it to the shop. I'm just going to the shop, I'm just going to the shop. See, I'm retooling some Carly Rae Jepsen.
Oh.
So I'm just going to the store, but,
Yeah,
just to the shop.
To the shop.
Shop,
We're
yeah.
being a bit-
Same thing.
bit more
same
British
diff.
about it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going down to the shop.
So stories is number one.
Yes.
And then history, and then ownership and prevention.
Yeah.
So just real quick, Emily, could you like one sentence sum each of those up?
So stories is just going to be like sharing your own personal experience of what is happening in that particular moment. History is going back into your brain, into your memories of the things that might be triggering to you about that particular thing and why it caused you to have the reaction that you did. Ownership is taking ownership of like the reaction that you had and maybe even admitting like, hey, I could have done that better. And then prevention is having actionable steps for figuring out like how to do better next time.
Yeah.
Bam.
That's great. Bam.
Bam.
Bam,
Yeah.
bam, bam, bam. Well done.
Yeah. I'm going to use this in my own life faux show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do have a secret bonus 5th step.
We do?
Yes, we do.
say it like that.
I didn't hear about this.
Even
So
Emily
secret,
doesn't
even
know.
Emily didn't know.
I thought we were perfect. We went to the shop.
Yes, we went to the shop. Yes, that is good. But we do have a bonus secret 5th step.
Okay.
We're going to be talking about that in our bonus episode. If you want to be able to get access to our bonus episode, then go to our Patreon to get more information about that. So we would love to hear from all of you about this, about what are some perpetual, quote unquote, unsolvable problems in your relationships that you've made work? What are deal breakers for you? Have you used some kind of repair framework like this for getting things feeling better after a fight with a loved one? We want to hear about it. So the best place to share your thoughts with us and with other listeners is on this episode's discussion thread in our private Facebook group or Discord chat. You can get access to these groups and you can join our exclusive community by going to patreon.com/multiamory. In addition, you can share with us publicly on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. You can email us at info@multiamory.com. You can leave us a voicemail at 678-MULTI05. Or you can leave us a voice message on Facebook. Multiamory is created and produced by Jace Lindgren, Emily Matlack, and me, Dedeker Winston. Our episodes are edited by Mauricio Balvanera. Our social media wizard is Will McMillan. Our production assistants are Rachel Shenowork and Carson Collins. Our theme song is Forms I Know I Did by Josh and Anand from the Fractal Cave EP. The full transcript is available on this episode's page on multiamory.com.
Hey, this is Andrew Gurza, disability awareness consultant, crippled content creator, and host of Disability After Dark, the podcast to shine a bright light on sex and disability. And you're listening to a Swing Set podcast at swingset.fm.